Okay, everybody can be seated. Welcome to Slauson Girl Speaks. I'm your host, Slauson Girl, bringing you world news with a South Central state of mind. In recent weeks, we have seen continuous protests outside the sheriff's station on Imperial near Normandy in South Central since the murder of Dijon Kizzee by sheriff's deputies. For 4 to 5 nights, the streets seemed like a war zone in a sense, as mostly protesters who had traveled from outside the area mixed in with community members faced off with the police. Videos shared to social media showed helicopters, smoke from tear gas, and other explosives being thrown in the air. Police gave press conferences denouncing what they called outside agitators. Local news stations also showed those being arrested were mostly non-black people not from the area. As a native of the community, this bothered me for several reasons. How do we empower black people in our own communities? Are these non-black folks really allies of the black community? Meaning, did they do the education and research necessary to include themselves in our fight for liberation? Were these non-black people being arrested in South Central working with any black organizations from South Central, or were they showing up on their own? As I began to ask these questions to some of the allies, I was met with some resistance, and in some instances, I was downright disrespected. Today, I discuss a recent protest in South Central with Tara Perry, who is a community advocate and has also ran for Los Angeles City Council this year, as well as Corey, who has been coming to South Central in support of the community to protest since Dijon Kizzee was killed by sheriffs August 31st. How are you guys doing today?
I'm well. I'm very well, actually. I had taken a few days for pretty much some me time and getting back grounded. Doing this advocacy work is very emotionally draining, so you have to kind of take some time and do some self-care. So I'm doing a lot better today.
Okay, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm great as well. I took a little mental health day myself yesterday, so I feel pretty refreshed as well.
Nice. Glad to hear that. So, let's kind of get into a little bit of background on you guys. Excuse my pronouns, but that's gonna sound sorry.
I think y'all's fine.
Y'all, my bad.
I like
y'all got. Yeah.
I think you guys are gender neutral.
Right. Okay. Well, how are you? Let's get into y'all background. What has inspired you to do community work?
For me, I'm born and raised here in Los Angeles. I grew up in the Valley. I've been in and out of South Central all my life, so I have roots here. The type of work that I am doing as far as being an advocate, getting involved in politics, it really stems from just my care and love for my community. Growing up, I've always had questions about why is the black community in the state that it was in. And a lot of people could not answer my questions. And then when I went to college and I studied sociology, and I'm realizing this is all by design. And so how do we disrupt that design? And we have to kind of change the trajectory of where the black community has been going, because it's been against our will, and it has been pretty much manufactured in our community. And a lot of people don't know that. So to run for office, to bring awareness, and to try to fight against the system, that's why I do the work that I do. Not to mention I have a 5-year-old son, black boy I'm raising. I was pregnant. I was actually in my last 3 weeks of pregnancy, and I watched Fruitvale Station. And I've always, been a part of, I've just been an advocate pretty much all my life, depending on the different issues. And this was, when was my son born? 2014. So it was after Trayvon Martin, and it was the repeated killings that we were seeing of black men. And it was I really have to do something. I never want to be in this mother's shoes, in the scene where she goes to claim her son's body. And it just did something else to me. It definitely, I'd always, like I said, always been an advocate, but it definitely electrified me to another level to feel responsibility, not just to my community in general. I have responsibility to this child. to make sure that I do something about this system and not lose him to the same way. So, yeah.
Definitely. So what about you, Corey? What has inspired you to kind of, be involved in community advocacy?
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs in the South. So I was born in Texas, and I was raised in Florida. Actually, my mom lives like 5 miles from where Trayvon was shot in Sanford, Florida. She lives there. Yeah, so I grew up in Orlando, and then I spent some time in Virginia as well. Virginia is where I saw racism the worst. Kind of like the covert racism. Like, of course, you would see the Confederate flags flying around on trucks, but like you would also see things like the cashier not cashing or not accepting a check from the black woman at the grocery store kind of thing, but then she wouldn't do that to the white customer, that kind of stuff. I saw a lot of that in Virginia. And the town that I lived in, Newport News, was literally segregated over a set of train tracks. Literally. It was one side of town, it was the community center and cat cafes and Brazilian steakhouses and whatever. And then you cross over a set of train tracks and it's like a food desert. The sidewalks aren't even, in proper repair. The buses don't even run in frequency down there. So I kind of grew up around that kind of racism in the South, and then when I moved to California, something about this movement inspired me to go out to my first protest in Santa Ana. So I was protesting alongside mostly Latinx residents there, protesters. And at my first protest, it was peaceful, and then we got shot up by rubber bullets. I was watching 19-year-old girls get, maced. I was like, ooh, something else is going on here. I'm here, a white person protesting with the Latinx community for Black lives, getting maced with them. And then, so that's kind of what got me started here. I didn't really get into advocacy until I, lived here in Southern California.
Mm-hmm. Okay, definitely. So, Tara, you talked a little bit about going to school and your studies basically answering the questions that you had in terms of why does your community look the way it does. In 2020, when you look around in the Black community in Los Angeles, what would you say are some of the most pressing issues?
Let's see. Most pressing issues, I would have to say high unemployment. Where I live in District 8, we have 40% unemployed. The median wealth level, or the net income, is $32,000, and they're building up homes that this segment of people can't afford. Gentrification definitely is another pressing issue. There is lack of providing for the Black community. It's lack of resources. It's lack of jobs. Living wage is an issue, definitely. We're definitely being priced out of Los Angeles. So my mom actually just got gentrified to Antelope Valley, and that's from the valley. So everybody is being pushed out. So I think that's a major issue. And of course crime, but crime is a byproduct of poverty. And when you don't provide for people, you're going to get crime. Well, you're going to get poverty, you're going to get crime, you're going to have over-policing, you're going to have police brutality. And it's just a never-ending cycle. So yeah, it's quite a few, but yeah, those are my main two: gentrification and lack of employment.
Definitely. And so, what have you chosen to dedicate most of your time to fighting for?
For Black liberation.
What does that look like to you?
To me, for Black liberation, I feel like it is the Black community coming to a full consensus, right? Because we have different types of Black people, but we need to stop, not saying we're having inner fighting, but there are people who have different agendas and different priorities. And I think there needs to be a conversation among the Black community and just start prioritizing our freedom. There are some people who fight for job protection. There are some people who fight gang violence. There are some people who fight for immigrant rights. It's we have to actually come together and see what it is that our community needs to prioritize, and not all these different groups working in silos. I think that is going to, number one, help Black liberation, but we just have to come first. You know, we've done so much fighting for other people. We have to actually gut our community of white supremacy that's been embedded in our community since we've been here.
Definitely. So I can agree with what you're saying in terms of, you know, certain answers that you received through your studies and stuff like that. And one thing that I feel is that, you know, the black community that has been dealing with continued, you know, they know exactly what state sanctioned violence looks like, even if they don't call it that, right? We know exactly, because we're facing it. Our families, you know, are being killed, and it's a continuous cycle that affects not just the person but their family members. It affects the collective of us as black people who feel that could have been us as well, right? And so basically, when we see the recent protests that happened in South Central, I know that we discussed a lot in terms of, like, you know, why the protests kind of looked the way they did. And one question that I had was, you know, I appreciate allies, but how can we empower those from the community, you know? So from your perspective, and then Corey, I'll ask you this as well, why do you feel that the protests looked the way they did in South Central, the ones at night, not the ones that were more organized during the day by Black Lives Matter or like Community Coalition proposed?
You're asking me first, right? Okay. I think that, well, we know that police violence in the black community is major, and state sanctioned violence. And so a lot of people were really upset because we're in the summer of George Floyd. Like, there's been a lot of civil unrest. A lot of people are just activated, and they want to be there and they want to support. But when it comes to people in the community, this is everyday life for a lot of us. Like, a lot of people don't just show up and march and things like that. But yes, the summer of George Floyd is definitely different. And I think that it's an unfair expectation to have of a people who have been, for lack of a better term, broken, right? We're traumatized people. And to expect us to come out, and not that we can't advocate, there are black people out here. There are a lot of black folks who can and have that privilege to be able to protest, who can actually interact with law enforcement without that interaction being escalated, right? If you have people, like we talked about, poverty, and there's going to be crime, there are also going to be people who are possibly on parole or probation. They're less likely to come out and protest and go and intentionally engage with the police.
Right.
That's not going to happen. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the way the protest looks, because a lot of quote-unquote allies, or even non-black allies who come out to help out in South Central, they have that privilege to do that. And I think because the summer of George Floyd has happened, there are people who have much more experience, and they're just coming out to respond and to aid the community. Yeah, I would definitely love more black people coming out, but does that mean that the issue is no longer important because there aren't as many black bodies there as we would like? No, this is still an issue. This young man was still brutally murdered by the sheriffs, the racist sheriff department. We have to call attention to that, and I don't care what the color of the people are, as long as the agenda is the same and the talking points are the same, and we're talking about Black Lives Matter and we're centering black people and black liberation. I don't care who's saying it.
Corey?
Yeah, so these particular protests got a little violent on the sheriff's end. I've been protesting more or less every day since late May, and I've been to rowdier protests, like, you know, as far as like the protesters getting a little crazier, you know, like in places like Santa Monica and stuff, and these protests were chill. I was actually really shocked to see
Fairfax is crazy.
Yeah, I've been to some of the protests that had some teeth, and this was not it. We did not come to cause any kind of violence, no arson, no destruction. This was not the glass smashing protest. Like I said, I've seen those downtown, I've seen those in Santa Monica. My group of people did not come to South Central to cause a ruckus or to cause mayhem in the community or to disturb businesses or anything like that, I promise you. So to me, the protests looked the way they did because I think the sheriffs made a decision that they were going to crush these protests with force. They decided that instead of, beating around the bush and letting us speak our piece, they were just going to call it unlawful early. When we failed to disperse, they would give us 5 or so minutes. Then they would start open firing. And then it looks like chaos and it looks like mayhem. And then that's the thing, is that when it looks like a war zone, it's very easy for the media to spin it as, oh, look at these violent anarchists coming in, look at the chaos that they created. But in reality, it was really just like any other protest where a group of people would come and chant and hold signs, and then we get open fired upon, and then it looks like a war zone. And then they can kind of spin it, spin it the way that they do. But I can tell you that our intent was never to cause any kind of harm to the community. So in that sense, there was really nothing to defend the community from on the sheriff's end. So we didn't come to cause harm to the community in the first place.
I felt like the level of violence also was the indignation of the sheriff's department. Like, no, we're gonna do what we want, because this is the community in which people they aren't used to people bucking up against them. So they're gonna do what they want. They're gonna push people out. They're gonna intimidate them. And I think it's twofold. I think it's that, and I think it's also of course we know the sheriffs are racist, but I think it's also from the top down. From the Trump administration, we know that Donald Trump came into town and things like that. And I believe they got word to be more aggressive toward protesters. I think they're kind of exhausted. We're draining the city of resources, so they're calling it early now to shut down the actual protest, and they're going to just show us that we don't give a f in these black neighborhoods. Like, we're going to do what we want, and you're not going to call attention to us and call us out.
Okay, definitely. So, I guess one of my main concerns, or only concerns that I had, was that, Black Lives Matter, they held the initial protest, calling people to South Central after Dijon Kizzee was murdered. And so that, it's on Twitter, there's various people that can see that, and so I'm just trying to keep in mind, if we're talking about Black liberation, how can we keep our organizing? How can we keep our organizing in a way where it's most effective for Black people? I appreciate allies. My only thing is, I just feel that if they're outnumbering the Black people, that's just a point of concern for me. But, that's kind of irrelevant. That's just a personal thing. I guess my main concern was that when I saw that the protesters were continuing to show up in South Central, my question was, what Black organizations were they working with in the community? Because, now we're not in downtown LA. We're specifically in people's communities, Black and brown people. And I just wanted to know, where was, the ally, where were they getting their point of command from? Where were the Black people? And so when I would ask these questions to the people that I saw, were very integral in getting folks to the South Central community, or if I would ask, someone who was arrested, there was just different resistance that I got. You would think that I came out and was just like, hey yo, bitch, like, why the fuck y'all over here? Like, it's always like very just like, hey, what Black organizations are you working with? Like, no matter how, they may feel, especially if it's not coming from a place of disrespect, I don't see what the problem is. But if I don't see, like, if I'm definitely not being disrespectful to you, what's the issue? And so that tells me that that's just a red flag for me, that I feel that these people, some of them that are coming to South Central, haven't did the education or the healing necessary to really consider themselves an ally to Black people. Me and Corey, we had a conversation earlier, kind of talking about, what are some of the reasons why non-Black people who have been marginalized feel so like in tune with Black struggle, because they've been marginalized in a sense, some of them based on their identity, some of them based on their economic status, right? So I understand that there's a commonality there. I just worry about these folks really understanding their role as an ally. And so Yeah, I was just, we kind of talked. Also, Corey, you're more aware of the different moving protests that happen in Los Angeles, as well as like the different folks that are involved in that. And so you have just a way broader understanding of it. And so, yeah, like, would you like to touch on anything? I know that, we said like your background, you said that you come from a more privileged background. However, you can still see what's happening, which is why I actually asked you to come on this podcast, because when I, addressed some concerns to you, you were actually very receptive, and you went back and did your research, and we had a further conversation after that. So I was like, okay, this guy actually is somebody that I want to talk to further. I kind of want to keep up with him. He's somebody that, that I feel kind of gets it in terms of his role. And so, yeah, we were talking about just like the different reasons why some of the people that aren't necessarily from South Central would come to the community to support. Would you like to like touch on that at all? Just kind of like.
Yeah, so first I'd like to apologize for, any attacks that were made against you, because, as allies, we can't say, like, what, Black Lives Matter, except for the Black lives that don't agree with us ideologically and politically. Exactly, it doesn't make any sense. So, as allies, we need to stop attacking Black female leadership, okay, first of all. So, let's just get that out of the way, that's not cool. But besides that, I think that a lot of allies we're trying to find that balance between, these communities are where the murders take place. This is where the sheriffs are actually killing and murdering people in the street, shooting them in the back over bicycle code violations. It doesn't happen in, West Hollywood and Santa Monica. So I think that, we come here in solidarity with the community, while a lot of the ally groups have decentralized leaderships. So there is not necessarily like one person you can point to. So sometimes these nighttime protests are a little bit more decentralized. Instead of it being like one organization that it's tied to, it's kind of like either individual activists or kind of smaller cells of activists kind of spreading word around social media and then gathering. And yeah, but we do recognize that these communities have been over-policed for decades. And we are sensitive to the fact that when we come in and our presence does cause the police to tear gas and shoot rubber bullets into the neighborhood in the community, and there are bystanders. My new friend Dante that I met, he lives in the parking lot of like the laundromat parking lot. He lives in his Mercedes there, and his car has been, keeps getting shot up by rubber bullets and, tear gas like running through his AC. And his grievance is that these protesters come down to South Central on a Black Lives Matter mission, but they walk right past him in his Mercedes. He says, oh, so what about my life? You guys coming on a Black Lives Matter mission, your Black Lives Matter t-shirts, but I don't see that money. Like, I'm still here in my car just gets shot up with rubber bullets. I'm still here after the protest, at risk, when you all go home. And I think that's something that's important to consider. What are we doing besides coming and facing off with the police? Because that's optics. Okay, that's optics to come and face off with the very murderers and then to have them shoot at us. And it's like, well, it kind of proves our point. We're here protesting police brutality, and then you respond with police brutality. Hey, that's on you. Guys, we don't want to terrorize the community any further. So I think that's important. Now, what else are you doing to uplift the community when you come here? Are you supporting the small businesses when you come here? Are you, sliding a couple bucks to the unhoused residents? Are you getting them a plate when they need it? Maybe go to Target and buy someone a blanket or something like that? What else are you doing besides coming here and screaming F12? Because that's the optics of it. But we need to ask what we're also doing to uplift the communities with your wallets, essentially. There's no other way to put it, with your money.
Right, definitely. But we do appreciate the real allyship, but please cut the checks.
Right.
Redistribute the resources.
Mm-hmm.
And that 7-Eleven right there on Imperial in Normandy is Black owned, so
Is that right?
yeah.
That's a good thing to point out, that a lot of times, white protesters, we protest against anti-capitalism and anti-fascism and things like that, but it's like, things like 7-Eleven, that's a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Black-owned franchise.
That's a Black-owned
So,
franchise.
And I assure you that we did not come to smash out the windows of that 7-Eleven, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
No way. No way. Here.
Yeah.
Spend your money in there when y'all
Exactly.
come
We
down to
come
protest.
we come and spend our money, and then we spend our money at the Chinese shop there, and then the police want to. They're acting like they're defending the community. Well, they're the ones further terrorizing the community. We never came to smash any windows.
Right.
We came to spend our money there.
And they're defending them. They're
Right.
protecting themselves from scrutiny. That's what I think.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, we should keep in mind. I don't recall any buildings being looted or burned or smashed or
Or
windows.
spray painted on or anything. Besides the sheriff building,
Yeah,
that's
right.
it. The sheriff's sign, that was it.
Right. Okay, so actually, I don't want you to have to touch that, but would you mind passing me the end of that
Which one?
cardboard thing? I'm so sorry. Oh, thank you so much. We can cut that out. Okay, so we mentioned the sheriff's station being vandalized or whatever, which who cares? But the only thing that stood out to me again was the symbols or the acronym ACAB. Okay, like can we talk about that?
All
Like,
cops are bastards.
where did that come from? For one, I thought that I thought the people were saying Black Lives Matter, and then all of a sudden you have this ACAB, and the thing for me is, again, I appreciating white allyship, but under them, me questioning to what degree do they understand their role. We also kind of a little bit talked about this, Corey, about the reasons why some of the folks who had been protesting already in Los Angeles against the capitalistic structure, how they basically felt, you know, to come and support basically us in South Central. They were already kind of engaged in this work. They feel they understand the framework, but could we at all kind of talk a little bit about like what we were saying versus like, okay, we have some groups of white folks who are fighting a similar fight, which is like, I'm sorry, I said I would lead up into this better, but do you kind of think we could talk a little bit about that? Like, what are some of the ideologies of the non-Black groups who are now merging, in a sense, with Black Lives Matter protesters? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, a lot of these groups they view where Black Lives Matter, like the mainstream Black Lives Matter protest, kind of it's very race based. A lot of these ally groups, it's very class based. Their arguments are class based against capitalism, but they view the problems and the goals as synonymous. So they believe that with the downfall of capitalism and the downfall of corporatization, it's like capitalism is the structure that put Black people's backs against the wall in the first place. That through redlining and unfair housing practices and all these things,
And
it's
slavery.
like so. And then corporations, for example, like these are the corporations that are in bed with the politicians and writing the laws. Like they're like Walmart is writing laws like the Stand Your Ground law. So like Walmart was involved in writing that law, Stand Your Ground, that like gets passed in places like Florida. So they're in bed with the politicians, the corporations. So it's all systematic. That's where systematic racism comes in, because it's like through the downfall of the corporations that are donating money to the police stations, right? That it's like the goals are the same. So what I see is like Black Lives Matter has been going for a while now. On a separate trajectory, you have these anti-capitalist, anti-fascist movements that have also been moving, but more underground. Now that there's so much uprising going on, I see it not so much. I've heard of like accusations of like, oh, like a hijacking of the movement. I think it's more like a conjoining of the movement, and they see everything as one. The problems, the goals, the outcomes, but obviously there's some disconnect that's going to come in when it's like, oh, was it Black Lives Matter? Is this justice for Dijon, or is it F12? Right? So and those are fair questions. I don't think that anybody needs to be attacking anyone just for asking those questions. It's like either back it up or concede. You have two options. I don't think that it's fair to attack someone just for asking a question that you think is hard to answer.
Definitely, I agree, for sure. So, what do you want the public to know? Because like we mentioned before, the sheriffs have basically painted the narrative of the outside agitators causing ruckus, being arrested, and things like that. What do you want the public to just be clear on about the 4 to 5 nights of unrest, in a sense, quote unquote, that happened at the sheriff's station on Imperial?
That we came in solidarity, that we came to seek justice for Dijon Kizzee. That man was pulled over for a bicycle code violation, and then he was murdered in the street. We heard the lawyer of the family, the official representative of the family, give a call and said, hey, we don't consider anybody outsiders. We welcome anybody from the community, from the greater Los Angeles area to come, and from beyond to come. If you want to seek justice for Dijon, so please come. So we heeded that call and we came. And yeah.
I think it's also important to mention Los Angeles is 2/3 transplant. Like, no one's, I'm born here, you're born here. Like, it's very rare that people are born here and live here and stay here. So the whole outside agitator it's kind of ridiculous because most people aren't born here, so most people are coming from other places. People come to school here. That doesn't mean that people cannot come and speak up for the community. I think none of that is relevant. So I was glad to hear the representative from the family actually made the statement that he made, and that the family supports even outside agitators. That is the sheriffs trying to change the narrative and get people attached to something else. That has nothing to do with this man that you just killed. That has nothing to do with it.
Right.
So are you saying that his life doesn't matter and that other people, even if they are outside agitators, shouldn't care enough about this human being to come and lend support to the family and to the community and demand that you stop state-sanctioned violence on Black bodies?
Right. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that the family, was able to say how they felt and to support basically the narrative that was being painted against the protesters. Well, not supporting that.
And shout out to the family and our sincerest condolences to Dijon Kizzee's family and his aunt, the one who raised him.
It's Fletcher.
Yeah. It's very difficult. And just 2 years ago, AJ Weber, 2 blocks away, was murdered in the same fashion. So it's time for this community to stand up with even the outside agitators, that we all come together and push to make more demands of this system. It's an election year. We have to do more. We can't afford to lose any more of our people to this type of senseless violence.
I agree. I'm glad that you made that point in terms of, coming together and making demands. Protesting is important, and I acknowledge that, I just think that we need to be making more demands, and within that, like, what are our demands? You know what I'm saying? Because right now, we are appealing, in a sense, morally, I feel like, you know what I'm saying? And then we're, using the tactics, in a sense, of Dr. King, to say, like, okay, they're going to show how violent they are, and the media is going to capture that, and it's going to be all exposed. But it's like, in reality, we have to demand, like you said, changes. You feel me? So I've been saying it. What is going on with the policy changes from our officials to address the excessive force and the deadly use of force that police have? Until we start addressing the right that they have to take our lives, then I think we're going to keep running up against this wall. For example, you just saw Breonna Taylor's family. Well, I know this is different, but it's just like, if we keep from an individualistic level, we're just going to keep these payouts, you know what I'm saying? But where is the institution of concrete change? Even though that's a similar situation, I know it's kind of totally different. Rest in peace to Breonna Taylor. We'll just keep it home. Anthony Weber's family, they
$3.7, right?
$1 million, but what happened to the officers who killed this, teenager? So my thing is,
Teenage father.
Right, he was a teenage father. He didn't have a baby. So I agree that maybe, there was something through the pipeline with Donald Trump in office that accelerated this, but we also have to keep in mind that this also was happening under Obama.
Yeah.
This was happening before Obama. And it seems like it's going to happen after Trump because he didn't spend his whole presidency in office, and I don't see any demands and policy changes, period. And then the protest is to support what we want changed,
Right. Like I have an organization called Black Pact, and that is about the Black community making a social contract among each other that we are going to be responsible for our own political advances. I know we are in the protest stage, but my question is, when do we get out of this protest stage, right? Because with protest, you agitate, you bring attention to the issue, then you strategically plan, then you push for policy, and you make demands. And I'm like, how many more elections have to pass us by before we actually ask for something?
Right.
It's a little ridiculous, and I'm at that place. I go to every protest that I attend, and I make sure, look, allies, we love y'all and thank y'all for coming out and having our backs and being our shields. But beyond this, you must practice Black politics when you leave here. The Black community, we have to come together and make specific demands, and the demands that we will then push down to our white allies and our non-Black allies to still continue and participate, right? If Black people are withholding our vote because we want if we want a Black agenda and we want reparations, a comprehensive reparations package with programming and cash payment, white people need to do the same too. White allies, you need to withhold your vote and demand a Black agenda.
What do you think is the percentage of our white folks that's going to do that, to vote against their own best interest?
But then you have to ask yourself,